Welcome to the first video on the spin cycle. By the end of this video, we will be able to understand what the spin cycle is, how to influence the spin cycle to get what we want, and the challenges of affecting the spin cycle. So to define the spin cycle, we need to understand that this is a collection of our entire experience that we're dealing with. And really, from a broad perspective, it's our lives made up of tiny segments or spin cycles that are constantly going on all day long, every day. And that gives us the daily experiences which make up the broader experience, what we call life. And so we use a model to understand this, and we call this model the spin cycle. And this really breaks down larger processes into bite-sized pieces so that we can work through them a little bit at a time. And that's just so we can understand what's going on a little better, and so then we can retrain our mind to think more consciously, which will produce more intentional and more mindful experiences. Basically, it's so that we get what we want and what we need out of life, so that we can feel better, so that we can heal, so that we can feel fulfilled, and basically so that we can just be happier people. An experience will continue contributing to and affecting other circumstances, for example, and that will further add to our problems, or it can add to our solutions and positive experiences. Rarely does it really happen that incidents are isolated and have no effect on our lives or other people's lives. So denying the subsequent effects is a way that sometimes people try to justify their negative habits or behaviors or thinking, or so that they can continue their negative thinking for different reasons, which we'll talk about later on. In layman's terms, we kind of call this the snowball effect, that whatever happens, it just seems to all pile up into one big out of control ball, and that affects whatever actions that we do from there on out. Now, taking a look at the slide, we see that the spin cycle is made up of different components. So first, what happens is we have the circumstance. Something happens, okay? And that circumstance produces a thought by our permission, right? Either we made a positive thought or we made a negative thought about the circumstance. Okay, so the spin cycle itself is neither positive or negative alone. It depends on what we thought about the circumstance that came into our life. Okay, so the spin cycle is neither inherently positive or negative. So we're going to take a look at each of these components in further detail in subsequent videos so that we can fully understand the role that these play in the cycle itself. Because as we're saying, a spin cycle is not inherently positive or negative. It's exactly what we make it. So for example, if you are a writer and you are developing a story, so it's up to the writer to decide what kind of spin he or she wants to put on the story. How does this author want the story to go? How does the author want the story to end? And all of the things tucked in between, how does the author want all of those things to develop? So likewise, we are like the authors of our life. Okay, so the results or the ending story of our life is in our hands to such a great degree. And this gives us a lot of power over our lives. And this is really, really empowering. We get to decide how things are going to go. Now, it is true that sometimes results go wrong despite having solid, good plans and processes. This is very true. So we're going to discuss those issues and how to manage the unexpected results in greater detail in later videos. So now let's draw our attention to how can we influence the spin cycle. So the spin cycle starts basically where the previous results leave off or starts a cycle of unrelated to the previous events. And that could be due to issues with our interpretation of life, for example, and how we deal with life and all that life entails. For our purposes right now, let's just understand that we start with circumstances. You see circumstances over here, which lead to thoughts. Okay, thoughts are here and thoughts are here. And so thoughts are either negative or positive. And this is our choice. Okay, this is our choice to have negative or positive thoughts about the circumstance which happened. Okay, so depending on if the thoughts are negative or positive, that's going to evoke feelings about the thought, which was about the circumstance. And over here, you can see in the positive spin cycle, those are the positive thoughts are going to evoke feelings about the positive thought, which was about the circumstance. So the feelings thereafter will trigger actions. And those actions will be either conducive to our circumstances and helpful to our circumstances, which will lead to results. And so that's where we usually say, you know, life is not going like I want it. So we need to stop and think about the circumstance, the things we think, the things we feel, what we did, and then we can see why we are not getting the results that we want. Okay, so if we're not happy with how things are going in our lives, we have to take a good look at each of these components of the spin cycle to see why we're not getting the results we're hoping for, the kind of results that are going to make us happy, the kind of results that are going to make us feel peaceful in life or help us to fulfill our goals. And so that's why we need to know how to set goals. We need to know how to retrain our mind to think. And so we're going to discuss these kinds of details a little bit later on. So now we ask the question, why is it so hard to change the way we think? Well, there are challenges, there are triggers. We're human. Okay, so we have different things that happen to us in life or things that are intrinsic inside of us. We have inner struggles like jealousy, negative thinking, stinginess, fear. Maybe we've had past trauma experiences. Maybe we have struggles in our finances which keep setting us back. Maybe we lack time management skills, or we have trouble setting permanent, lasting, good goals. Maybe we struggle with health and emotional issues like we feel overwhelmed. Maybe we have anxiety, depression, social issues, phobias, the list goes on. A lot happens to us in our time here on earth, right? Life happens to us while we're here. So yes, there are, obstacles, there are challenges, and there are triggers, but this does not mean that we're hopeless. We are allowed to think and interpret circumstances in any way we want. This power belongs to us. No one else has the power to control how we feel, and we don't want to give that power away because that leads us to feeling powerless, like we're unable to change anything in our lives, or like we're unable to do anything about a situation, and that leads to hopelessness. And there is always hope. So the take home in this video is, what is the spin cycle? So we define the spin cycle that it's an entire experience of whatever we're dealing with. It's neither positive nor negative until we spin the circumstances by the thoughts we think about the circumstance, which triggers the rest of the cycle to initiate. Okay, how can we influence the spin cycle? It's up to us to interpret a situation and think either negatively or positive about the circumstance so that we can affect how we feel. And then our feelings will determine the course of action that we will take, which will give some sort of result. If we learn to think consciously and mindfully, then we'll start achieving the desired results. And what are the challenges that prevent us from attaining our desired results? Like we said, that's a whole long list of things that could happen in our lives. It's very plausible that in order to train our mind to think more positively and in a healthier way, we may have to go through some soul searching and emotional work first and all along the way, because it's a journey. We need to identify those challenges that may be setting us back. Like we said, the issues of health or emotional issues like anxiety, depression, financial constraints could be any number of things or a combination of things. But if we learn how to effectively deal with those challenges, that will correct our thinking so that we can achieve what we want and achieve what we need out of life. So we will be happier people. So coming up next is understanding the components of the spin cycle along with practical exercises. We are going to do some plugging and playing, right? We're going to plug and play incidents, circumstances that go on, and we're going to see how to manipulate that circumstance, how to manipulate what happens to get better results from those circumstances, right? We're going to learn how to plug and play. So stay with us in the next video, and I will see you there.